Hey, buddy. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a very special solo, kind of, edition, person and a half of the FilmWheel podcast. Joel was unavailable, so next best. And maybe, next best option, maybe even a better option. We've got my dog Porter here. So I'm going to try to explain the movie Flight Risk that I saw last night. And we're actually here in my house. So you might be able to see some trees, and we're not in a parking lot per usual. So this is a little bit different, but I think it'll be kind of fun. Okay, so Porter, you ready for this? If you have anything to say, feel free. Now is the time when you can bark to your heart's content. Is that the phrase? Heart's contentment? Your heart? And also, happening right behind me, you can't see on the other side of the camera, my wife is jogging on a treadmill. So if I look past the camera and smile somewhat awkwardly, she's literally right there. I wish you could see it. Okay, let's kick this thing off. Here we go. So Flight Risk, actually directed by Mel Gibson, is a very short movie. I can't remember if it was 87 or 91, but under an hour. I would say, just right off the bat, usually we say just quickly what we thought of it. It was okay. I mean, I had fun. It was a good kind of pop. It isn't really a blockbuster, but it was a small scale thriller that I had fun with, but it wasn't great, if that makes sense. I think a good movie for streaming, and hopefully I'll explain why. Okay, so it was short. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think we've gotten to the point. The other movie I was considering seeing was The Brutalist, which I still may see. Who knows? But it was over 3.5 hours. No booping the microphone. Over 3.5 hours long, which is almost 3 times the length of this movie, which is kind of crazy to think about. Basically a mini series at that point. So I think we need to get back to the point where movies don't have to be 3 hours to make a point. So I like that. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it did feel pretty short. As I mentioned, directed by Mel Gibson, who I like. I like pretty much everything. I looked up the movies he's directed. This is either his 5th or 6th movie, which is kind of crazy. He's obviously acted in way more. But as far as directing movies, I would have thought he directed more than 5 movies. I think if I can get it right, it was in the early 90s, The Man Without a Face, which I have not seen. Passion of the Christ. Apocalypto. Man, I'm forgetting his others. Yeah, anyway, pretty much everything he's done, I've really enjoyed. So this was a strange movie. Apparently he is filming Passion of the Christ 2. I don't know what the title for that one is, but high expectations for that one, and a very different... You going to the back? Oh, you just you just got a little dog butt in the... Okay, you stay back there. Maybe that's a sign that this wasn't a great movie. I don't know. Okay. Where was I? Mel Gibson directing. I don't know that I could see Mel Gibson in this movie. There was some okay camera movements, directorial choices that were made, but nothing super special going on from a cinematography standpoint. In fact, there were some pretty cheesy moments, mostly with CG. The movie kicks off really quickly. So in the first, if you've seen the trailer, it takes place in a plane. There's some current events right now maybe we'll get back to in a bit. But there's a setup scene with Topher Grace, and then he's captured. You're on the plane for the rest of the movie within the first 5 minutes, maybe. I mean, it doesn't mess around. It gets going pretty fast. But there's a goofy scene with a moose that bangs on the window. It's kind of a jump scare at the beginning. And then there's a super goofy, wide establishing shot, of which there aren't many. Most of the entirety of the movie takes place inside this very small plane. But there's this wide establishing shot, beautiful shot with mountains in the background. They're walking, very tiny on screen. They're walking toward the plane. But the people that are walking toward the plane look like I could have made it. Maybe PS2 type graphics. Really takes you out of the movie kind of levels of cheesy. But, the pacing is good right off the top. I would say the first act is pretty exciting. Gets going quickly. There's not a lot of setup to do. I would say the acting is pretty good. Topher Grace, Mark Wahlberg playing a villain, which maybe he's done a couple times, but most of the time he plays the kind of goofy hero. And he's a pretty convincing villain. The only thing I didn't like about his character was the baldness was very strange. We'll get back to that in a second. And then I can't remember her name. I know her from Downton Abbey, which I'm not even afraid to say it, one of the best shows of all time. She is Lady Mary Crawley in Downton Abbey. Not even going to say her name. I can't remember. But that's who she is. You would recognize her if you saw her. She was very good. And a pretty convincing FBI agent as well, who has a little bit of a backstory, and you kind of feel for her. This is her first case in a while because she had something in her past that took her out of the field and back into a desk job. And the acting is good. I'll say that. The setup is pretty good, makes sense. From the trailer that Mark Wahlberg is the bad guy, but you don't know when the plane is taking off exactly when it's going to be revealed that he's the bad guy and not the real pilot of this plane. So that was good. And then, once the first altercation, spoilers from this point on. If you don't want to see any spoilers, okay, I'm going to spoil this movie for you. All right. So, sorry. From that point on, it kind of gets a little silly and starts feeling, I can excuse some bad CGI because that's been happening in a lot of movies, but from this point on in the movie, it starts to feel a little cheap. There's a lot of thrillers that you could compare this to, and I felt while I was watching this, like, I've seen this movie in some way. Like some of the formula of this movie I've seen in other movies, but I couldn't exactly think of them, maybe because they're somewhat forgettable. But you basically never leave the plane. The camera is somewhere in this small plane. Sometimes Mark Wahlberg is restrained. Sometimes there's action scenes, a little bit of fighting that you can do in a very small plane. Not much bigger than this car here. So you can kind of imagine what's going on there. There are, at one point, Mark Wahlberg, for at least half the movie, Mark Wahlberg is restrained. He's been beaten. And she's getting some assistance. Lady Mary Crawley, I don't remember her name in the movie, is getting some assistance via her phone. Her cell phone works. I think she has a satellite phone, so that makes sense. But there's, she's connected via her boss at the FBI to a flight, not a flight attendant, another pilot who can help her because she's flying this plane now and she doesn't know how to fly. So that's solved very quickly. It's not too much of a challenge for her. They could have, I think, pressed on that a bit more, of try to create some drama around her flying. It's a little half-baked there because basically she's got instant access to a pilot. She talks to her FBI agent boss and then her boss's boss, because there's a subplot that takes place where basically she thinks her boss has called in or is the leaker to the mob, who it's a mob movie. Mark Wahlberg is in the mob. Topher Grace's character, should have mentioned this earlier on, Topher Grace's character is a mob informant. He was a former accountant, I think, kind of a wisecracking accountant who basically never shuts up, so it makes sense that he wants to talk to the FBI. But it kind of, there's not a lot of drama that's too much fun at that point on. The silly thing, I'll say, is that when she's taking these calls with the pilot specifically, he's hitting on her, which, okay, I mean, sure, that's kind of funny. Not really. It's a little awkward. And then he hangs up. So, okay, you've learned how to fly. You can keep the plane safe. And I think he says, I'm gonna hang up because we don't want to kill your phone battery. But it was never established that her phone was almost dead, so that was a little silly. And he's just gone. So you think he would stay on the phone with her and maybe they would practice landing, but no. He calls intermittently, and then, especially when we're jumping to the end of the movie, but when she's getting ready to land, there's a little bit of drama that's built up at that point, but he's helping her with the landing. This is the first time they've practiced it. She can't find the controls that he's describing, again, for the first time, which is just silly. And then she hasn't landed yet. She's gotten close. She's coming down maybe a few hundred feet still in the air above and he hangs up and he says, I think you've got it from here. I'll see you on the ground. And she did not have it. I'll say, Porter, she was not a good pilot. She does not have her wings yet. Not qualified at that point to land the plane. It's a bumpy ride. Mark Wahlberg flies out of the plane and then is ran into by I believe the fire truck or ambulance that's chasing after them. He should have stayed on and helped her continue landing the plane, which she was still doing. That was silly, and I think I laughed out loud. Yeah, Mark Wahlberg's hair. Let's talk about that for a second. I did a little bit of research, and Mel Gibson allowed Mark Wahlberg to really get into character, which is fine. He did a good job, again, convincing bad guy. But at one point, his hat is pulled off, and a two-piece or whatever toupee flies off his hair, and it's revealed that he is bald, or at least severely balding, with a little strip of hair on top. Look, nothing against bald guys. There's a reason why I wear my hat. I still have more hair than Mark Wahlberg, so I can say that. But it doesn't look right on him. I would say that took me out of the movie a little bit, and a few audience members also laughed as well. So I don't know that was needed, but maybe it makes sense because we've seen Mark Wahlberg in so many movies lately in the last 10, 15 years where he's playing a very similar character. So maybe that's a device they came up with to make it more believable that he's a bad guy. But I don't think it worked. So I would have maybe come up with something a little different there. But that's what they went with. So that's Mark Wahlberg, the evil. I would say evil. He was ready to chop them, and he said this multiple times, ready to chop them into little pieces, and he's just constantly describing the ways that he's going to murder them. And okay. Yeah, he's a bad guy, and that's established. So yeah, I would say, to recap this thing, there's not really much else to say. It's a fun movie. I would wait to watch it on streaming. I wouldn't, with how expensive it is to go see a movie, yeah, maybe it does make sense to have a movie have a longer runtime to justify paying $18 for a ticket, and then if you're getting popcorn or anything on top of that, it's an expensive affair. I get it. If you're there, you've already got a babysitter. Maybe the movie should be 2.5 hours. But the other thing I was thinking about, would people go to, and let me know in the comments here, would people go to a movie experience, you buy one ticket and you can see two shorter movies, like two 45, 50-minute, smaller contained stories? That would be an interesting concept. Maybe somebody's thinking about it. I don't know. But this was caught in a weird thing where you're not quite justifying your movie ticket. So I don't know. It's a weird time with movies between, movie studios picking streaming or putting it in the movie theaters. I don't know how much they spent on this. If it's more than $10 million, I would think the mob might actually be involved. And this is like a money laundering type thing, or somebody's got something on Mel Gibson to pull him into it. I don't know exactly what was going on. Not bad. I would say, in summary, 6 out of 10. I think sometimes in this podcast we've done steering wheels. I'll give it 3 steering wheels. It was okay. It was fine. Some decent suspense off the top in the first act. After that, it's okay. What do you think? It was either the movie was so boring or I was so boring. The dog's asleep there in the back. So maybe next time we'll get Joel back and it'll be a little bit more exciting. But there you have it. That is Flight Risk. see it in streaming in your living room if you want to watch it. If not, there's some other movies this summer. Not summer. It's not summer at all. It's going to be summer pretty soon. There's Captain America. I don't know that anybody's super excited for that. And that's all that I can think of. So, maybe we'll be back. It might be fun to see Captain America do another podcast, get this thing going again. But let us know in the comments what you do want to see. So, signing off. That's the end. Thanks for watching the solo edition, solo and a half, because you weren't that exciting, of the FilmWheel podcast. So if you're just watching for the first time, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. And that's it. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.